Hey folks in English 4, just wanted to give you this video to watch. You guys have done the discussion on the first few pages of 6 degrees of separation, so I wanted to go over those questions and make a few points about them. That way, when we move on, we can do so all with a kind of the same level of a foundation of knowledge of what's going on. All right, so the first question is about the title. What does the title mean? Where have you heard it before? What does it mean for the story so far? Pardon me. So the title, 6 Degrees of Separation, it's this way of saying that in one way or another we're all connected. The 6 degrees comes from the idea that we are connected to everyone else in the world by essentially five other people. And so if you can find the right five people, you are connected to someone else, anyone else really. It's funny. So this was written in the 80s with that 6 degrees of separation title. It's interesting now because that was before social media. I've seen things now that say that with social media, it's about 2 or 3 degrees of separation. So, thanks to social media and likes and friends and whatnot, um, it's about half degrees of separation as to what it used to be. Where have you heard it before? I don't know. That's pretty much something only you can really answer. I know that there was a very kind of famous game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, the actor, who, as it goes, he was in so many movies that you can connect Kevin Bacon to any other actor by just six other people and thinking about what movies he was in and things like that. Now, the last part of it, what does it mean for the story so far? Well, so far, um, and it's always hard for me not to give away too much here, but so far, we've seen Paul. He's been introduced. Same thing with Flan, Wisa, and Jeffrey. And right now, just from that definition of 6 degrees of separation, you can tell that the story, again, to this point, um, gives us an idea as to how Paul comes to know Flan and Wisa. And that is through their kids. So there's, a 1 degree of separation between Paul and Flan and Wisa. Now, again, my answer stops there because, of course, I know the whole thing, and I'm not going to say anything more because anything more would be a bit of a spoiler. So, um, that's all I will go into right now. More stuff will be revealed as we get into more of the book and the plot and everything else. So keep that in mind as you're reading more and more. Briefly describe in 3 to 5 sentences, summarize what happens and to whom in the first several pages. So obviously you've got Flan and Wisa. They start the book. They start kind of flustered and panicked. Um, you see what that scene is a little bit later because they immediately kind of flash back uh, to a scene where they're all of a sudden in dinner clothes and they've got a friend, Jeffrey, who's coming by and they start talking about art and South Africa. And then Paul comes in and he's injured and they kind of help him get bandaged up and he makes dinner for them and he starts talking about school and how he knows Flan and Weisa's kids, and actually who his famous father is. So that's pretty much what happens in those first 30 or so pages. And speaking of Flan and Weisa get flustered, um, on at least my page 17, Flan and Weisa get flustered for a second time. Why do you think they're so easily flustered? What does this quality say about them? Now, there's a few things we get from the introduction of Flan and Weisa. The first one, the most, I think, obvious one, is this idea that they get flustered, that they get panicked, that they um, kind of let their emotions get out in front of them, if you will. They're not the most calm people, let's say. And so, like I said before, uh, they start the book being flustered and panicked and trying to figure out what's going on. And then, if I can get to page 17 here, oh, they get uh, flustered when you've got this person in Paul, who comes in, just kind of bursts through all of a sudden, unplanned, and has this injury and needs to kind of be taken care of. And they get kind of flustered. Lisa, especially, is kind of at a loss and she has no idea what she's kind of doing or how to help or anything like that. So, um, again, I kind of wanted students to just kind of think of that. What does that mean? Like I said, they're not very good at staying calm. Maybe they're not very good at, going with the flow, rolling with the punches, that type of thing. Um, all of this says something about their character that will either influence or have some part in the play later on. Um, the other big thing with Flan and Weisa is that they are wealthy, as is Jeffrey. And so there's, we get these little things. John Gare gives us these clues as to who these people are. Playwrights do that at the beginning. Really, any writer does that at the beginning because then we see how those qualities affect what actions they take, how they respond to people and events, and things like that. So keep that in mind as well. Um, Now, what was that? That was number three. Number four, why are Flan and Weisa so eager to take Paul in? What impression does Paul give of himself? Well, um, there's a couple things that go into his impression. Weisa especially takes uh, kind of an interest in Paul. Um, and that, again, will be one of those things I was just talking about, where it's a quality of this character of Weisa that you'll see kind of uh, makes her take certain actions later on. So Flan and Weisa are so eager to take Paul in. It's not just, a stranger is injured and they want to help. Um, it's someone that I think there's two main things here. One, neither of them are just simply that he needs help. One is that he is connected to their kids, uh, Woody and Tess. Once he does that, then they start to go, oh, okay, well, there's kind of something familiar there, right? We know our kids, we know their friends, we want to be friendly and helpful to our kids' friends. So that's part of it. I think the other part of it is the impression he gives of himself. Um, you see a lot of Paul describe not just his family, um, who his father was, of course, as mentioned, Sidney Poitier. He talks about going to private schools in several different countries. He kind of basically name drops uh, international cities like Rome and Paris, Los Angeles, things like that. Um, so the impression he gives is that he's maybe not so much rich, but he's from wealth. He's from prestige. Um, Again, the kind of respect that Sidney Poitier has of being the first real prominent African American actor. He was the first one, I believe he was the first one to get an Academy Award. Um, and so there is that impression he gives to Flan and Wisa of essentially, I'm kind of the same as you. I'm of the same social class, right? Again, he himself, Paul, that is, may not be rich, but he's well traveled. Um, he knows almost like the celebrity lifestyle, things like that. And so that is something that, at the very least, attracts Flan and Wisa. Obviously, Flan and Wisa are also trying to, what's the best way to put this? Basically, trying to get Jeffrey to loan them $2 million. And I don't make any judgments on your family or your um, social class of anyone out there. Uh, but I haven't been a part of any deals that are worth multi-millions of dollars. So, that's certainly a different experience working with that kind of money. Pardon me. So again, Paul not just having the connection with their kids, but having this lifestyle, this social status equal to Flan and Wisa. So I think that's what helps Flan and Wisa trust him and want to help him. Um, Now, five, it's tricky, obviously, uh, with what does it mean to be black or any other race in America. That can be tricky. Um, and then the kind of more broad question, what does it mean to be American, even? Um, and it's kind of tricky. Paul certainly talks about it. At one point, let's see if I can find it real quick. Um, he talks about he didn't know what it was like to be black in the racist way until he came to the U.S. Um, oh, nope, I'm not able to kind of find it. And there goes Paul's stuff. Um, and it's interesting to see how Paul talks about it because he separates this experience, and you get a fair amount of race, certainly in terms of uh, Paul's race and even Sidney Poitier's race. Um, Not just how Black Americans are kind of looked at here, at least in the 80s, and in the US, but in other countries as well, not only South Africa, but, the other places that Paul has gone to school and visited. Um, what does it mean to be American? And that's kind of an interesting one. That one, I don't know that I expect a real clear, definite answer um, from students. I just kind of wanted them to think about it. And I will say part of the difficulty is that if you've never traveled anywhere else besides the US, you don't, you know, whatever culture you're born into just kind of seems natural. It's not natural. But if you don't know any other way of living, then, whatever your culture is seems like the default. And that's why it seems like it's natural. Um, but one's culture is not natural necessarily. Um, so, yeah, I don't know if anyone has uh, traveled out of the country or seen other cultures, things like that. Um, it's only from that other perspective that you really get an idea of kind of what your culture is, and perhaps more specifically what it's not. Okay, and then Last one. This is a narrative one. Why do you think the characters talk to the audience as much as they do? What effect does this device have on the audience? There's a couple of things with this, actually. Um, just as a structural thing, the characters talk to the audience simply because there's stuff the audience needs to know that none of the characters would really tell each other. So if you can't convey information from characters talking to one another, that's primarily in a stage play, then you have to basically kind of, as a side, almost as a secret, tell the audience. um, and of course, as the audience, we assume that the other characters aren't paying attention to the characters when they're doing that. Um, so it's kind of a way for the writer to convey uh, information to the audience without all of the pesky characters that you're watching or the dialogue. um, I did find it interesting that in a lot of the reading journals of the experience with plays, there were quite a few students who either had taken theater classes or were in stage plays themselves. So I'd be kind of interested to think specifically what those folks think. Um, what effect does this device have on the audience? Now, right now it's mainly Flan and Wisa, um, and I think most of it is Wisa who is talking to us. In fact, let me see. Oh, no, Flan does a little bit too. Um, but those two characters in particular, we kind of have an idea of who they are, their social status, things like that. And then they're talking to us. So, first of all, the effect is that we are involved in this story in some way. Um, we may even be thought of as uh, contemporaries or peers or even equal to Flan and Wisa. Um, and I'll kind of let you sit on that and think about that for a little bit. What does that mean exactly? It will probably become more clear as we get more of the characters and who they are and what they do. Um, so that's about it. There's definitely some things that from here that I want you to keep in mind as you read through the next chapters, the next pages, things like that. And there aren't really chapters in a play. There may be acts, but there's not a separation of those in this one, which is why I kind of have to stop the reading at kind of awkward places. The other couple things, at least one other thing. Um, First of all, you'll notice that Catcher in the Rye was mentioned, and that's a big part of at least Paul's education, Paul's thesis. That's obviously a book that we'll be reading. The other thing is kind of interesting and kind of funny by itself is that the poetry I have lined up for you is done by an author, T.S. Eliot. Now, he, if if you remembered from 6 Degrees, that he was the one that also wrote the piece that is essentially inspired Cats. Um, so it's all kind of connected to some degree. We'll see what it is, and I'll make these kind of connections more overtly when we get into those books. The last thing I wanted to say was notice how it's not quite a joke, although once you see more of the characters, it kind of will be. Um, it's kind of they Paul talks about making a movie of Cats and how, for the most part, it won't really work. He talks about Sidney Poitier going to a producer and saying about how all the reasons or how it can't be made, all the reasons it can't be made. And in essence, by doing that, he figured out how it could be made. Um, I will say that in the 80s, it was not made. Um, in fact, there was a version of Cats that was made just recently, and it bombed. So, whatever Sidney Poitier thought he could do with Cats, the folks just recently in 2018 or whatever it was, they didn't get that. They didn't find the same way because it was not a good movie. Infamously bad, pretty much. So, um, and I've taught this book for a while, and that whole thing of Cats was kind of funny until they actually made it. And you can imagine both mine and Jonathan's surprised that they actually announced that they were going to do it. Uh, and you can probably figure out how not surprised we were that it didn't do very well and it wasn't very good. So that's it. I'm going to try to make one of these for each of our reading assignments. That way, we're all on the same page, so to speak, and we all kind of get at least the basics of everything that we need to out of these readings. So that's it. I will see you for the next discussion questions. Bye bye.